Hey guys, I am excited to do yet another podcast episode on the subject matter of ghosts and how we haunt ourselves. That was a really popular podcast episode I did a couple weeks ago, and I want to revisit it because I've had some more reflections that are actually very interesting, and I know you'll enjoy them. So, I want to tell you how my mother had a ghost story, and I want to share that with you. So, she told me that when her mother died, she felt an evil presence somehow in her home suddenly. And she said it was dark and it had a foul odor. And she thought it was the ghost of her mother because it would say things just like her mother did, very, very cruel things to her. She also told me that this presence accused her of killing her mother. And even though that was so very objectively untrue because my grandmother died of complications from Lou Gehrig's disease, my mother actually became suicidal at the time because she believed it to an extent. I remember being 7 years old and her schlepping me to the rectory at her church to meet with a priest to help her to exorcise this thing from her home. Apparently, the priests were not of help to my mom, but she told me she did have an interesting experience where one day she was opening the closet door in her bedroom and she saw Jesus, and suddenly that soothed her and the presence was no longer in her home. So I guess that ended well. I have often thought about my mom's story, however, and I've often wondered if that presence was truly a ghost or was it a demon? And I've also wondered if there's a difference between those two things. But given now what I am learning as a therapist, I would say it was neither. Rather, it was a manifestation of my mother's disassociated hatred at her mother. It all makes sense now. Why the presence told her she was responsible for her mom's death and why she was suicidal, because she believed that her own hatred somehow killed her mom or had a part to play in her mom's demise. Remember, when we dissociate from our anger and hate, it takes on a life of its own, morphing into something spooky that seems way more powerful than it actually is. This is why OCD symptoms nearly always involve sickness, harm, and death. Just like a shadow looms much larger than the actual object, our dissociated feelings pose as more dangerous than they really are, which makes us scared of our own shadow when it actually is our own shadow. We haunt ourselves when we refuse to own our authentic feelings. Here's another family ghost story, this time of my cousin who I'm going to call Ellen. When her father died a few years back, she told me that the night before his death, she was spooked in the middle of the night while she was sleeping. She experienced an evil presence that woke her up, and her response was to turn her body to face the other direction, and she fell back to sleep. She also shared that out of her entire family, she was the only one not ready for her father's passing. All her siblings and her mothers were ready. They were okay with it, as her dad had suffered for a very long time. But Ellen fought this reality, demanding that he go back to the hospital and not stay at home to receive hospice care. At the time she told me all this, I could not understand her denial as to why she would fight the obvious reality of her father's imminent death. But now it all makes sense. The evil presence that woke her up was her hatred of her father, who had been very abusive and even nearly killed Ellen when she was a girl. Ellen didn't want to acknowledge her hatred, and just like my mother, she disassociated from it, allowing it to haunt her like it did, especially when her father was dying. Now Ellen was being confronted with her own hatred, but she did not want to face it. So she literally turned her head and body to face the other direction. This explains why Ellen was the only family member who refused to acknowledge that the father was dying. Her dissociated hatred was making her feel responsible for his death, making her feel guilt that she could not bear. Now let's contrast Ellen and my mother's experience with my own, because my own mother died 2 years ago, and I did not feel remotely haunted. In fact, I joke that my mom haunted me when she was still alive. I've come to own my feelings of hatred toward my mother, and I feel no shame and I feel no compunction to dissociate from them, because I know that my hatred of her is not a reflection of me, but 100% a reflection of her. She was not a good mother and she was not a good person, and there's no shame in acknowledging this. The danger is when we refuse to acknowledge it. And this is what I see daily as a therapist. When we refuse to recognize the evil in our parents, we are doomed to repeat it ourselves. Denial is a form of self-deception. And although it may protect us from feeling pain, it ultimately does us in as we lose sense of all reality. It prohibits our differentiation from our parents, us becoming different from them. It's like the saying that you've heard, those who cannot remember the past are doomed to repeat it. Acknowledging is a type of remembering. Our feelings are there for a very good reason, to keep us rooted in reality. There is no shortcut to feeling them and owning them. They keep us awake and alive, and they protect others around us as they work to prevent us from becoming evil. When we cut off our feelings, we also lose our empathy. This doesn't mean we only feel hate for our parents. We can feel love as well. Those feelings are not mutually exclusive. But we do need to know it is okay to hate the monster parts of them and to allow that hate to protect us from them and people like them. Our feelings allow us to distinguish between the parts of our parents we want to emulate and the parts we do not. Feelings are like limbs, as they serve a vital purpose and they keep us mobile. We can't just cut them off, because if we do, we develop phantom limb syndrome and we are haunted. Let's commit to feeling our feelings and knowing that they're there to give us wisdom. Feelings don't make us bad, they make us human. The world desperately needs more people who are human and fewer people who are monsters. Thanks for listening today. Please subscribe to either my YouTube channel or my podcast or both. Please share this with a friend and please give me a great review. Thanks so much for listening today.